Thanks, Stephen. Thanks also to the World Trade Center for inviting me to speak. Typically, I speak around the London circuit, and it's the first time I'm speaking here in the Emirates, so very happy to be here, but I will start with a brief introduction, just to give you an idea of who I am. I'm based currently in the Netherlands, originally from the United States, educated at Cornell, spent a few years teaching also advanced analytics at the University of Pennsylvania. After that, I did several years of consulting work developing decision support, risk management systems, moved into quantitative finance where I worked in fixed income, foreign exchange, credit risk, credit insurance. And then eBay brought me on board to help them out with the data and analytics for their global classifieds group. And that's a network of about 20, 25 internet properties spanning 6 continents. So there I worked a lot with data, big data, analytics, and BI. And eBay is interesting because they've got several different big data systems, and they span the systems, combined capacity of the systems is bordering 100 petabytes. So it's quite a huge system, so that's interesting. I left eBay to start my own company, which is Data Science Innovation, and that's focusing on data and analytics in a broad range of applications. What I'd like to focus on today in the 30 minutes or so that we have is really looking at customer insights, okay? So really deepening the understanding we have of the customer, specifically of the customer journey, and talking about how we can draw benefit from that, okay? And it's the customer journey which takes this into the realm of big data. Before I go into the customer journey part at the big data perspective, I want to take it back one step and talk about how customer insights combines with strategy to drive business value. Okay, so I'm not quite yet in the big data part of it, but I want to give a very interesting and illustrative example of how understanding your customer is really going to drive value within your organization. And when I say customer, I'm coming from an e-commerce background primarily, so I use the term customer, but really it's any individual who's interacting with your organization. For healthcare, it's a patient. For government, it could be a citizen. But it's really anyone who's interacting with your organization. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about today, almost everything of what I'm going to talk about today, is going to extend beyond the commerce world. Because all organizations have a digital presence, and so pretty much everything I say is going to be relevant even beyond the commerce world. Rewind back to 2002. Target organization, second largest discount retailer in the United States. $70 billion in annual sales. Fierce competition. Okay, Walmart's the leader. Fierce competition, but between 2002 and 2005, you can see the year-over-year growth they had. About 20% during this period. So what was happening with Target during this period from 2002 to 2005? Well, there's a long story and there's a short story. And I'm going to give you the short story. The short story is that the leaders at Target had a vision. They had a strategic vision, and they got the group of analysts together, and they sat the analysts down in a room, and they gave them a mission. They said, tell us which of our shoppers are pregnant. Okay, this is what they told their analysts. They said, tell us which of our shoppers are expecting the birth of a child within the next 9 months. Oh, and please tell us when they're due, when the due date is. Okay, so these analysts were charged with this mission. And at their disposal, they had all of the information that Target had on their customers. So what is that? What was the database that Target had? They had, every customer had a unique customer ID. Linked to that ID, there was perhaps a credit card and all the purchases made on that credit card. There was perhaps an email address, perhaps a name, and any additional information that Target could acquire or purchase on that individual. So that might be purchasing demographic data, gender, address, age of that person, linking it with that person's purchases. Okay. So now you've got a group of analysts sitting in a room somewhere in the United States for weeks and months poring over the data, trying to determine how to identify which customers in the Target store are pregnant. Okay? And did they do it? Well, in fact, they did. So over the course of weeks and months, they started to see patterns coming out of the data of what these people would buy and when they would buy it. and they were able to link that data to the actual due dates of women because many of these women had actually registered with Target for the baby registry. And when they did that, they said, yes, I'm expecting the birth of a child on such and such a date. So the analysts knew certain customers had a specific due date because they had told Target. And the rest of the customers, of course, they had no idea. They only had to guess. But within a few months, the analysts had developed a sort of predictive basket of items that pregnant women would buy. And there are 25 items that these women would buy in a certain time span, within 9 months, which would allow these people with very high accuracy to predict which customers in this massive chain of stores were expecting the birth of a child, and even to predict within a small window when their due date was. Okay, so why was this important to them? The reason is because the couples who were expecting the birth of a child were at the point of making a massive change in their shopping habits. At no other point in their adult lives would they be more susceptible to start spending money in a new way. And now Target was in a position that no one else was in, which was they could start sending very specific advertisements and coupons to people at just the right time when they were looking at making major purchases and starting new habits. And this is what they did. Now they started just at the right time sending flyers to these women and saying, look at the baby cribs we have. Look at the baby clothes we have. Look at the diapers and everything. And this worked very well for them. And you can see the kind of growth they had. But about a year later, they made national headlines. And some of you may have heard this story. National headlines because a father, a very angry father, walks into the Target store in Minneapolis, Minnesota, with a flyer in his hand, and he says, let me talk to the manager. Holds up the flyer and says, you sent this to my teenage daughter. My teenage daughter who is not pregnant, you're trying to encourage her to get pregnant because you're sending her advertisements for baby clothes. The manager, of course, is like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm very sorry. I see the letter. I see the name. Let me take your phone number. I'll look into it. A week later, the manager phones the father up and says, look, again, I'm really sorry. I don't know what happened. Father's on the other line, very apologetic this time. Hey, I owe you an apology. I had a talk with my daughter. Turns out she is expecting. Okay, I hadn't realized it, whatever. National headlines. Target knows teenage girl expecting before father does. Okay? So this was really interesting because, of course, it was very embarrassing for Target, but it also got all the other companies thinking, what is Target doing with its data and analytics that we're not doing? Okay? One of the analysts in this group at Target was interviewed by the New York Times, and he made this statement. He said, just wait. We will be sending you coupons for things you want before you even know you want them. He said this to the journalist. Okay. So in fact, this is not outrageous. This is a very true statement. Because with the right data, with the right analysis, you could with a very good degree of accuracy, predict what a shopper, what a consumer will want next, or what they're very likely to want within a short space of time. Okay? Is that bad? Well, it's actually very good, because it makes the shopping experience that much more successful for the customer. It means the customer walks out of the store, walks away from the shopping experience, having everything that they forgot they wanted, and they don't have to come back later to get it, they don't miss it later. It benefits everyone. But it's the customer understanding that lets you do this. And in fact, in terms of the business growth, it's more than just the customer understanding. It's your initial strategy combined with your customer understanding that leads to success. Okay, so this is a really important point here. It's not a matter of just doing analysis, getting data. It's starting out with a high-level strategy, your view of the industry, then developing the customer understanding to get success. In Target's case, the strategy was this. They said people are stuck in their shopping habits. It's very difficult for us to win market share from our competitors. If we're able to identify people about to change their habits, specifically people expecting the birth of a child, we'll be able to grow our market share. That was their strategy. They added to that the customer understanding. Now, the problem now in our world and our digital age is it's very difficult for us to understand our customer. We don't have the face-to-face interaction we would have had 20 or 30 years ago. Okay? So we need a way to understand our customer when we don't even see our customers. Okay? And this is where data and analytics comes in. Success story is all three parts. It's your business strategy, it's getting the right data in place, and it's getting the right analytics on that data. Okay, so the second two parts are what I'm going to focus on for the rest of this talk. Getting the right data and doing the right analytics on it. Target started out with some basic data, demographic data, point of sale data. Okay? They didn't see what the customers were doing in their shops. They didn't see what items the customers were comparing. Tesco, if you remember their example, the Tesco card, which is a great success story, that was also about the same time, back in 2002, when they had massive growth. Similar story. They had point of sale data, they had demographic data, but not customer journey data. With the internet, what we can start to do is we can start to get customer journey data. This is where we're crossing into the realm of big data. And let me illustrate that with an example. How many of you within the room have, within the past year, purchased an Apple product? Okay, you've purchased an Apple product. So it could be a MacBook, iPhone, iPad, iWatch. Okay, so about 10, 12. Okay. Next question. How many of you have considered purchasing an Apple product, whether or not you actually did? You considered doing it. Okay. So think about everything you did when you thought about making that purchase. Okay. Every time you searched online, which words you typed in for the search. Okay. Every product you looked at, every time that you sorted your search results based on price, based on user review, based on total shipping cost, time. Think about all the user reviews that you read when you were deciding what to get. Okay, that whole decision process that went through your mind and that you acted out. Okay, so the answer to my first question, okay, not a whole lot of information there. I could probably collect all of that on one piece of paper. Okay, I would have your names, what you bought, when you bought it, how much you paid for it. That's the point of sale data for people who actually made the purchase. Not a lot of information there, but that's what most people are using to run their commerce. Think about the second question and all the information there. Okay? If I had all of that information, everything you'd done online in that process, I would start to understand what's important to you. I would understand, were you looking by screen size? Are you more concerned about battery life? Are you someone who's concerned about price, or are you more concerned about the ratings that other people are giving your products? Okay? And once I started to build that understanding, I would be developing a three-dimensional view of who you are as a customer. Not just what you bought, but I'd also understand why you bought it, how long that decision process was. Very likely, I would understand what brought you to a site, because I would start to see, did you use Google, for example, to come to the site to look for something? Did you respond to a targeted marketing to come to the site? So very much a three-dimensional view of the customer and the customer journey starts to build up as I add the information from your digital journey. Okay? So now I'm starting to understand your intent as you come shopping, your preferences as you click through the website, do sorting and searching, and really your entire decision process. So this is huge. This is a huge difference in what I had before, 10, 15 years ago, and what I have now for customer insight, customer understanding. Why is this in big data? So if we look at the example of eBay, where I was before, we had over 100 million customers, okay? Over 400 million online listings at a time. So there's quite a lot of data, but this is just the basic transactional data. This is not what I would really call big data. It's what you use to run the business, but not necessarily what you use to get the insights. Below the surface, below the tip of the iceberg, was all the data reflecting the user stories. The user stories of how these people entered the site, browsed on the site, conducted specific searches on the site, and executed on the site. Whether or not they placed an ad, whether or not they even logged in or registered, you're still seeing how they're interacting with the site and who they are as individuals and what's interesting to them. So whereas we have only a few 100 million users and listings, we have several billion database calls every day. So 2 to 4 billion page views, and then 70 to 80 billion database calls as people interact with the page views. Each of these are part of an online user story, a customer journey, which gives us insights into the customer and helps us improve the shopping experience. Okay. How does this change our view of the customer? Okay. Our basic view of the customer is one-dimensional. Starting point is all customers are the same. We make no differentiation. As we start to add information, like Target did, like Tesco did back in the beginning of this century, we start to add purchases and demographics, this more static information, and we start to develop a two-dimensional view of the customer, which already gives us greatly improved insight into who the customer is. Now, as we add additional information, specifically customer journey, we're really getting that three-dimensional view of the customer. We're really starting to understand the customer in a similar way that we would understand them if we were a storekeeper interacting with an actual person in front of us, interacting with them from the moment they walk into the door till the moment they walk out the door. Okay? And this is huge. Okay? This is so much more information, so much more ability to positively influence the shopping experience, the customer experience, your organization's ability to interact with the people with whom it interacts. Okay? I've got not just what they've executed, their purchases, their demographics. I'm starting to understand what they want, why they want it, the whole journey. This is the online data. Now I start adding in the offline data, the CRM data. I start adding in information when they phoned our customer service representative. I log that in the system. I start logging in the email replies, so when I send them an email and they open it, I've got a pixel there which says this email was opened, it was opened on an iPad, for example, it was opened on their mobile phone. I start adding in store visits, which I log, and I've got a multitude of different systems which are all giving me a full picture of what's happening with my customer. And I'll talk more about why that's useful. And then moving beyond this, as we're conveniently located next to these guys here, is I've got potential, which I think is not very well tapped yet, of also tying in information from wired devices that consumer might have. Okay, especially as I have apps which will transmit information specifically to my databases because of apps that I have with them. I could talk about this for quite a while. I gave a talk recently about privacy, and there's a lot of implications around this, but I don't have time to go into that now. Just to say that there's a lot of potential data sources that you can also link to the online data, that you can also link to the purchase data and the demographic data you have to a customer. And the point of everything I'm saying is that this data is here. Any of you, for example, any of you who have websites for your organizations, which I'm guessing is all of you, you've got a mass of data available to you. Most organizations are not using that data, at least to its full potential. And the goal of using that data, again, is to complete your understanding of your customer and use that customer understanding coupled with analysis to greatly improve the customer experience. Okay, so now on to that third point. What do I mean by improving the customer experience? I'm going to talk about the goals we have and then some examples for that. It's easy with these technology and analytics events. I know it's easy to lose the forest for the trees, just a wealth of terms and concepts and technologies and such. I think it's very important to always stay grounded with where you want to go and to see where technology and analytics fits into that. Okay, so I mentioned at the beginning, it starts with a strategy. It starts with what you want to do with your organization. How can data and analytics help you with that? Okay, so in terms of e-commerce, your main goal is you want to make shopping successful. Okay, you want the person to walk out the door with a product which is relevant for them. Ideally, you want them to find all the products that are relevant so they're not making multiple trips to the store, they have everything they need. but it's all about, in the end, making shopping successful, which is done primarily through understanding your customer. Okay? If you're a storekeeper, someone walks in the store, you have to have that interaction with them. What are you looking for? What are your preferences? That type of thing. What do you need in order to make the shopping successful? And the third thing, which people don't think about perhaps as often, is to learn from your customer. Okay? And this is also very interesting because a lot of your customers are smarter than you are. Okay, that sounds a little bit funny, but you may have had this experience where you walk into a store and you say, hey, you've done all your research. And the storekeeper may not even realize everything you know. But by walking in the store, you're actually telling the storekeeper, hey, did you know the newest model has this and this? Do you know that this is the most interesting thing? And by the time you walk out the storekeeper actually knows more from you than he did before you entered. And if he's smart, he's going to use that information to help the next customer. Okay? He's going to use that information, and the next time someone walks in and says, hey, I'm looking for a tablet, I want it to be kind of small, I'm not really sure, whatever, the storekeeper is going to say, actually, someone was in here yesterday, he had the same question, he walked out with this tablet, why don't you start by looking at this tablet? Okay, so I'm using information from my customers, feeding it back to help the next customers who come in. So this is a very important way that technology companies are using their customer data to feed it back to make the customer experience for consecutive customers that much better. Okay? And this is also a matter of using your data in a very smart way to improve the customer experience, improve the customer journey. So advanced analytics is going to help us through all these things. It's going to help us with search to make sure that people can find what they're looking for in a very efficient way, even if they're not sure exactly what they're looking for. Okay? It's going to help make recommendations for products that are going to be beneficial to them that they may not be aware they should be looking for or may not know how to put into words. It's going to help understand their customers, not only by giving them labels or identifying them as certain segments, for example, expecting mothers, but also by identifying them in terms of their intents and their preferences. Okay? So for example, yesterday Patricia had a great slide and she talked about, hey, my preference when I look for items is to know that no animals were harmed and and she had a whole list of things, right? And what I want to do as an e-commerce provider or as an organization is I want to recognize that this is a person who has those preferences and I want to deal with them in a way that accommodates those preferences in a very simple, straightforward way to make their shopping experience that much more streamlined. And as I mentioned before, learning from your customer's expertise, whether it's through machine learning techniques or through A/B testing. So I want to keep this at a high level and not go into the actual algorithms and such that people use. There's a variety of them, but just to more talk in terms of the business goals for the analytics. And we've touched on most of these before, but I'll lay them out on this slide. In general, what you want to do is you want to make sure to start by understanding and classifying your customers. So the basic example is I could classify someone as an expecting mother. Okay? But there's all sorts of different ways you could classify them. You could classify them by demographics, by gender. You could classify them by age, by shopping types, by decision methods, preferences. You could do this top-down or bottom-up, and by looking at all sorts of data. Okay? And you can do this in more ways than you realize based on the information you have. Just a very simple example is they did a study of 56,000 volunteers just based on their Facebook likes. Okay? Just based on what you like on Facebook, they're able to predict with a very high accuracy whether a person was male or female, whether they used cigarettes or alcohol, whether they were single or in a relationship, and even their moods, just based on their Facebook likes. So if you give someone your Facebook likes, they can predict with an 88% accuracy if you're a male, and with a 95% accuracy, they were able to predict which of these 56,000 people were African Americans. Okay? Just based on Facebook likes. And that's just an example to show you that the data you have can help classify your customers, segment and understand your customers in ways that you may not be aware of, if you use it correctly. Good. So basic starting point is to understand and classify your customers. In terms of making associations and recommendations, this is also very key. You want to be able to say, hey, you came looking for this, let me recommend another item. You purchased this item, what is a good second item to purchase with that? A huge thing in terms of not only driving upsale and cross-sale, but just making the user experience that much more successful because they're not left missing something that they should have thought of to buy. Recognizing intent and prediction. A lot of times this is churn. A lot of companies, especially telcos and people with subscription contracts, want to know who's getting ready to churn. Okay? And what they'll do is they'll have a database of who has churned in the past and what they've done, and they'll try to identify those at-risk profiles and target them. Now, it used to be that it would just be when I phoned up my telephone provider and said, I want to cancel, at that point they took action. They said, oh, no, please don't cancel, right? But now we're much further than that because I have data of all the different actions that have been done. So I recently saw a study of a French telco who started recording not just when there were bill disputes, but they started recording which of my customers are clicking on the terms and conditions of their policy online. Okay? Which of them are reviewing their bill and then clicking on frequently asked questions and then clicking on terms and conditions to see for example, to see their cancellation period, and then disputing their bill either on the phone or actually in a store or via email. So they're recording all of these different types of customer events, and they're tracking the paths and saying which of those paths eventually lead to the termination of their contract. They found that 14% of all cancellations followed a very specific path in this network. And they're able to step in at those points and try and take action to keep people from canceling their contracts. Just an example of how analytics can be used to recognize intent and predict an action and then be able to step in. Okay. How are we using this? A/B testing is a huge thing and this is more an example of why we're using big data for this. What we do is once we can start segmenting our customers, we can start giving them products which are tailored to maximize response rate. So this is, I don't have too much time to walk through this in detail, but A/B testing is essentially us analyzing how changes in our products will change the response rates of our customers online. This is a huge thing. This is sort of the basic step one of internet analytics. The way this works out in eBay is you've got from font size to font type to color to picture size, layout, a million things. No one really knows what works best, so you try them all, more or less. Using A/B testing, you see which one worked the best, and you go with it. Just thinking how much time I have to run through these. I think I'm just about out of time. Let me just quickly say one or two. User intent. I think this is probably the most interesting one. What we're doing with user intent is we're saying, is this someone who is the type of customer we're most interested in based on their past experience, okay? So if I see someone who's searching for all high-valued items, right? And then I can label that person as someone who's a high-value item person. And now as they're typing in a search term in my browser, I can start presenting them with only high-value items in the search results. Okay? With the shopping sequence, when I start to see someone and I see that they're looking for something and they don't seem to be finding it, what I can do is I can look back through all of the different past shopping experiences that I've seen where people started with the same search result, ended up with a purchase, and I can start using those endpoints as the most likely terms to feed back to that person, again, to help them complete the shopping experience as quickly as possible. This one I don't have time for. A lot of interesting examples, which I'd love to run through. But I want to leave a little bit of time for questions. And I think I think the most important examples I've given already. So I'll leave these for now, and I want to open it up for a few questions while we have time.
Thank you very much indeed, David. I'm sure we've got loads and loads of, well, we've got tons of questions from the audience here. There's a gentleman in grey there. I think he had his hand up first. Then there's a lady here. There's another gentleman there. So, David, just straight ahead of you, a gentleman in a grey jacket.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. I'm Sufyan Barghouti from the National Bureau of Statistics. I have two questions for the instructor on the lecture. Thank you for the presentation. It's very informative. Okay. My question is like that we know that analytics is still forming, that there is no unified analytics tool that we can use it across the big data or across the customers. My question of two parts: what about the fundamentals? What we have to do, or what we have to take into account when we are designing the analytics to avoid the case where if we change the analytics, we get a different result? So this is the issue that we care about, that we have analytics. Suppose that I do some other techniques and I reach another result. What should be done in place to make sure that there is a robust analytics process and outcomes? And most likely that 95% of anyone who will do it, he will reach the same story or the same results that will lead for intervention at the end of the day. Thank you.
Okay. So if I understand your question, you're saying, how do we make sure that analytics does not mislead us and we get the right result from the analytics? Is that right? Okay. Yeah, no, good question. The most important thing, I think, is you get the right people on your team, right? You get the really smart analysts on your team who are able to ask the right questions and try a number of different techniques and work well with the business. So you want really smart people who can work well with the business. And the danger with analytics is always if you put someone in a room and you say, come up with the results, they'll come up with they might make a small mistake, a small assumption, and it'll be completely ridiculous. But if they're working closely with the business, then they should be able to have that feedback loop where the business tells them what you're saying is obviously wrong. Or the business tells them, yes, that's very interesting, I hadn't thought of that before. But by having a very smart person who can work very closely with the business, that should put you in the best position.
And there's a question to your right over here. Just 1 second.
Hi there, my name is Laura from NBC. My question is about cross-screen reconciliation when you're working with an anonymous audience, and how you then make insights when people are using you on a tablet, on a mobile, on a PC, and they haven't logged in.
Okay, I had trouble hearing the beginning of it, but I think you're saying cross-device.
With an anonymous user base, when they've not logged in, how at eBay did you do the reconciliation of who the audience is and what their path is?
Yeah, what a great question. That is too good of a question. I'm very tempted just to pass it. But we struggled a lot with that. Yeah, it's very difficult. So the problem we had, especially in the classifieds group, is that most people didn't log in. Most people did not log in. There's ways around that. I'm not going to say what eBay did or does, but I will say that there are different ways around that with technology. So if you talk to people in the technology detail, there's ways to identify the devices. You can also link them to a user based on the email, whether they opened an email address to you on that device. Obviously, if someone logs in and they stay logged in on a device, that's great, because then you know they're still there. But it is definitely a challenging question. Yeah, and different companies deal with that in different ways.
I think there's another question in front of you there, David. Gentleman with his hand up, just to your right. Oh, you've got one to the left as well. Okay, a couple from that part of the room.
Thanks for your presentation was great. Thanks for presenting your insights on...
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Your presentation was great, and your insights on customer journey and how analytics is going to help was really helpful. I just have one question regarding the data quality. So the example you gave regarding the Facebook likes and how the accuracy of the data, how do you measure the accuracy of the data with reality? community, what's really happening versus what happens on the internet?
So your question is, how do I measure quality of data?
Accuracy. How do you measure the accuracy or the quality of the data?
The accuracy of the data, yeah. And the internet, there's a lot of issues with accuracy of data. Of course, there's certain data that has to be accurate, the financial data, the transactional data. But when you're looking at web logs, web analytics, that data is highly inaccurate because of technology is always changing and the browser settings and everything are always changing. In the end, then you just have to know sort of a certain good enough and work with what you have and understand the limitations of it. So you have to kind of, it varies per type of data. But definitely there's some data that you just won't get complete control over.
I represent a company in Dubai Internet City called the Q Innovation. We're into CRM business. My question is, I think if you can share with us your experiences, because I interact with a lot of customers. And the issue we see in many cases that companies do not put a lot of attention on collecting data the right way, because it is a kind of a hard for them, even when they do analytics, to really make business decisions based on the data they have. I appreciate if you can share any experiences about what kind of competencies you believe a certain executive should have in order to be able to put the criteria on which they should be analyzing their data, and how the decisions, the business decisions, should follow accordingly.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. It all comes down to the executive view on these things, right? So the way it has to be driven, so there's two ways this could be driven. The way it's normally driven is someone in technology says, hey, I really like Hadoop, I really like Cassandra, I really like AWS, I want to do it, can we do it, please, 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 right? That's typically how it's done. And then the CFO says, no way, there's no reason. So that's the wrong way to do it. Well, not completely the wrong way. But the best way to do it is you get an executive who's asking questions. Okay? You get the executive who says, can I identify the expecting mothers? Then they start really communicating with people and saying, can you do this for me? Can you tell me the customer journey? Can you tell me which customers have this intent, are most likely to churn, whatever? And then they start pushing that down and communicating with the technologists and the analysts and answering the business questions that they have. But you need the executive who's asking the right questions and communicating with technology and analytics.
In front of you again, David, please.
Thank you very much for your presentation. My name is Mohammed Amin Jalouli, and I'm from the National Bureau of Statistics. In order to make let's say, the sales better, you have to understand your customer. And to do that, you have proposed some models, and these models take into consideration, for example, the purchases, demographics, and let's say intent, preferences, customer history, and so on. During your presentation, you said that you sometimes buy data in order to make your estimate better. So what kind of data you buy for your model? And second, how can you link this data you buy with your data, the original one? Thank you very much.
That's a good question, thanks. So there's a lot of agencies which collect data, and it depends on the country, depends on privacy laws and such. And some of that data is anonymized and some of it can be linked, right? So in the case that you can link someone's email address to their demographics, like their gender, and their age, that of course gives you more information if you don't already have it. But that's really going to depend on where you are and what providers are out there at different points. So you really have to do the research to that. And that's really a huge part of what they call data science, is identifying that information. But it's not just personal information. A lot of companies are bringing in third-party web analytics, competitive information. A lot of companies I've worked with bring in weather information for whatever reasons, for various reasons. So it's a good question. It's a challenging question. And yes, you definitely want to link it as much as you can. If you can personalize it, that's great. Usually you're probably not going to be able to personalize it because there are a lot of privacy concerns.
I think probably, but there is another question, but I'm just going to say that David will be around for much of the day, and you can always contact him on his email address. But I think we can afford 2 more questions, David, don't you? Okay. One from the table in front of you and one from a gentleman just here. And then we'll move on to our next session.
In order to understand the customer behavior, is there any tool that you recommend for doing the analysis or the analytics in good?
When you say customer behavior in terms of their online behavior?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of tools that are going to give, a lot of web analytics tools that are going to give you the summary data, which will be how many visitors did I have, in summary, who did what on my website. And a lot of good tools out there. A lot of people start out with Google Analytics because it's free and it's a good, I mean, Google Analytics is a great starting point. If you're looking for something more enterprise level, there's a lot of other tools. You know, people use Omniture is a big one, Web Trends, but just a whole host of web analytics tools. Those are going to give you the summary data, which is going to give you a lot of insights, but it's not going to give you the customer journey data in the same level of detail. So if you want the customer journey level at a much closer level of detail, probably the next stage would be to go to Google Analytics Premium, which is going to, so the premium edition of Google Analytics is going to let you download the customer journey, the session level data into BigQuery, and from BigQuery you can take it wherever you want to. If you're more advanced and you've got technologically savvy people on your team, you can have them work directly with your web logs. Okay? That's a little bit of a dangerous path. Some companies do it. The advantage is it gives you complete control. The disadvantage is it doesn't have the same integration with Google products that Google Premium would give you. And that's, I mean, that's also quite key. So.
And we'll take just a final question from over this side.
Hi David, this is Nurullah. I'm from Dubai Electricity and Water Authority. I have basically questions about data science and data scientists. So what's the right time to build up the data science team and hiring the data scientists? And data scientists should be specific to a business division, or it should be a centralized kind of team?
Yeah, yeah, it's a good question, right? That the second one especially is a hard one to give a definite answer on. In terms of the team, I would say the important thing is you want someone on more the strategic level to start with, to say, hey, how can we benefit from data science or from advanced analytics, right? So you really want to say, where does that fit with our company, which is probably going to start at that level, at a more strategic level. And then you've got the analyst levels. So hopefully within your organization, each of the different business units are doing some type of analysis, right? So there's the possibility of putting sort of basic analysts all throughout the organization, and then someone at a higher level to do the more strategic, you know, where can we go with data? And then you can fill it out from there to say, and once you've identified a specific area in your organization that can really benefit from more advanced analytics as opposed to spreadsheet analytics, then you can start saying, okay, we'll hire a team for that. But what I would not do is I would not start by saying, we need data science, let's hire a team. I would really start by either filling it out with, you know, basic level analytics distributed in an organization, or start out by saying, let's get a real vision, do some proof of concepts first, and then only then build out the team eventually. So the second question, though, partly answered by the first, you do want people to sit close to the business to really have maximum business value. That doesn't necessarily have to be a data science team. It should be some sort of analysts. But in the end, it's very likely that you'll have a matrix structure where you share the knowledge of the data science people centrally, but their actual applications will be at a more distributed level. So it takes a bit of balancing there. There's not one clear answer, I would say.
A round of applause, please, for Dr. David Stephenson from
Thanks so much.
datascienceinnovation.com. Thank you very much indeed.